Breya Etherium Shaper. I'm definitely going to say Sculptor at some point on accident. All right, ready?
Yep.
So Breya Etherium Sculptor is one of the... I did it!
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome back to the Bulkhead. My name's Kale.
I'm Brett.
And today we're going to be talking about Breya Etherium Shaper, which is probably the best utility commander in EDH. It just does so many things. It has so much synergy with so many different cards, and that allows you to be like very flexible and tailor the deck to your specific needs. There's a couple of auto includes for sure, but it's a very flexible, interesting commander to play with.
100%. I came from like a really spiky spot. I think we've mentioned this before. We both did. We're playing a lot of Modern and Legacy. In Modern, I played Jund. That's my favorite deck. From Deathrite, Bloodbraid Jund, all the way to Luris, like busted Jund. And then 4 mana Chandra Jund in between all that. I love Jund. I love attrition. And so it's kind of hard to translate that into EDH because it's really easy to have an attrition deck when you're playing against one opponent.
Yes.
But then when you add 2 more players, then it's like, how can I play attrition against 3 players at once? The way I found to do it is through blink effects.
Yes, absolutely.
And so this deck has 33 creatures with enter the battlefield effects, and then 18 different ways to like blink those creatures or double up on the triggers that they produce.
So we're going to start by talking about the creatures in the deck with enter the battlefield effects that we're reusing with all of these blink effects over the course of the game. And they're separated into a couple different sections based upon what they're doing, when you're going to be using them, etc.
Yep, exactly. So the first section is interaction. There's 10 creatures with interaction on them. First off being Breya. She has obviously the enter battlefield effect making the 2 Thopters, but then being able to sacrifice those Thopters or 2 other artifacts to give something -4/-4 is huge. There are so many things with 4 or less toughness that you want to remove in EDH.
So many commanders.
Yeah, a lot of commanders have 4 or less tough. It's really strange how many things that Breya is just easily able to hit.
Yeah.
And that are very relevant.
And something we see in EDH a lot is that commanders, the cheaper commanders are more played. They usually have less power and toughness.
Yep.
And Breya will just snipe them.
Yep, and yeah, it's such a good feeling to have that on your commander.
And I've also seen Breya's life gain effect as well be super relevant. Sometimes a board wipe will happen, Brett will gain 20 life, and then he's just ahead as the game moves forward, even if somebody pulls ahead.
And there are cards in here that sap your life to enact their abilities. Yep. So being able to make that up through your commander is actually huge.
Yep.
But so Breya being the first creature with interaction. Then we have Duergar Hedge-Mage, Skyclave Apparition, Ravenous Chupacabra, Aerial Extortionist, shout out, Solitude, Massacre Worm, Agent of Treachery,
the dreaded Agent of Treachery.
Matchy Instant Scoop when you play an Agent of Treachery, Ashen Rider, and Shriekmaw. One of the newer additions, I'm trying that out. We're playing an Ephemerate, we'll get to in a little bit, but having that with like invoke creatures is pretty
super
good.
Powerful, yeah.
But yeah, I want to highlight the Duergar Hedge-Mage. It's one of the only non-green creatures that has an enter battlefield effect that interacts with enchantments and artifacts. And it's a really big deal because besides this, we're using Skyclave Apparition, Aerial Extortionist, and Ashen Rider, which are all, I mean, I know Skyclave is just as much mana, but Solitude, Extortionist, and Ashen Rider are all kind of higher cost creatures.
Yeah.
So having the 3 mana, basically your powered up Rex Sage in this deck is huge. And it does come with a little caveat of having to control both 2 plains and 2 mountains to have both sides of it work. But with having 4 different triomes, fetches, duels, it's actually pretty easy to get to 2 plains, 2 mountains. And we've made a short video on Aerial Extortionist, but it's one of my favorite white cards right now. Coming in, removing the most problematic permanent, and then gaining card advantage through people playing commanders or recasting the card that you exiled.
Yeah, it triggers off everything.
Yeah, it's
over the course of Magic, there's so many cards that have tweaked the, draw a card format. So whether that's impulse draw by exiling with like Prosper Tombbound, or whether that's playing things out of your graveyard like Flashback, like Rebound, Cascade, there's a million things. If you look through the mechanics of Magic that actually play cards that aren't from your hand.
Yep.
And with that, you're just going to be gaining advantage. And some commanders, like Prosper Tombbound, you're just hosing completely.
And on top of that, being able to blink it without them getting their stuff back for free is huge.
Yes. Fiend Hunter was like sort of, that was the problem with that style of effect. Or even Skyclave Apparition, they get a spirit back. So the fact that you can blink it multiple times makes it incredibly obnoxious in this deck and basically a must kill.
Oh yeah, and trust me, people try and kill it right away.
They do.
Which is crazy for a 4/3, 5 mana creature. Like, it doesn't have those like over powerful like stats. It's not like a 7/7 flyer, but yeah, people feel like they need to kill it right away every time I play it. They might just know how much I love it and want to ruin my day.
Just hurt your feelings.
Yeah, we won't go into that, of course. But yeah, so the next subgroup of enter-battlefield creatures is card draw. We have a lot of creatures with enter battlefield, draw you 1 card or more.
Molly D.
Yeah, I love Muldrifter, like we were just saying with Shriek Maw, being able to ephemerate it or cast a Resto Angel on it.
In response to the evoke.
Yep, with the evoke trigger on the stack and keeping it forever, draw 4 cards. Excellent stuff. But then also just having the 6 2-mana Elvish Visionary creatures is really huge in this deck. I mean, it helps smooth out your draws. You're constantly playing your lands. Obviously no green in the deck, so you're hitting your land drops off those visionaries, and then you're blinking them, and it's busted.
As LSV says, divination counts as mana fixing.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Because you're filtering through your deck. That's why Merfolk Looter is so good.
Yep.
It's a 2-mana card that smooths out your draws and you make sure that you're hitting land drops, you're hitting the spells you need on time. And that's hugely important here.
And they provide like a little interaction, like a Baleful Strix. No one wants to attack into a 1/1 with Death Touch.
No, nobody.
An already drew a card.
Yeah.
And you're going to be flickering these guys. 1 card minimum draw on those creatures. My favorite one out of all these is Watcher for Tomorrow, though. 2/1 for a generic and a blue Hideaway. So you're looking at the top 4 and choosing which one to put under here. And then when this creature leaves the battlefield, you get that card back. So not only is it a card draw, it's card selection and draw.
Yep.
You can't really ask for more than that on a 2-mana 2/1.
No, that card's been consistently great. I've seen you play it before and I'm like, oh, whatever. When it leaves the battlefield, you put the exiled card into your hand.
Yeah, not when it dies.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
Which is a huge thing. Super great card.
One of my favorite moments of this when Matt had to double check. Wait, when it leaves, not when it dies? Like, yeah. So, like, because you assume it would be when it dies, but no. Yeah, that's what makes it really good.
Yeah.
And yeah, Muldrifter also is an all-star. So, people are going to be interacting with our boards, destroying our artifacts, killing our creatures to stop us from gaining value. So we want to have recursion. We want to get those creatures back. We want to get those artifacts and enchantments back. So we have 4 creatures to do that with. 3 of them are going to be able to get back creatures and maybe some other small enchantments. So we have Karmic Guide, Phyrexian Delver, Sun Titan, and Sharum the Hedgemon to get back artifacts, because I've realized that people consistently are, as soon as I play a Panharmonicon or Conjurer's Closet, destroyed.
Yes.
And like, those cards are what brings this deck over the top and be able to make you the Archenemy, basically, because you're attritioning out 3 people at once.
Yeah. Something to be said about the ability for a deck to recover after it's harshly targeted by 3 players, by Wrath, or when they remove a key permanent. I've seen this deck a lot of times get sort of like wrathed out, and sometimes they'll keep, Conjurer's Closet or a Panharmonicon, and if you can then just cast a Karmic Guide, get back Agent of Treachery, blink it, you're way back into the game and way ahead, and it's almost as if the Wrath was good for you. So I think that's like very, very important for this style of deck that does play to the board a lot.
Yeah, one of my favorite, it just happened recently too, was someone wrath the board, and then I play a Karmic Guide to get back Sun Titan, which then gets back Charming Prince, which flickers Sun Titan, and then gets back Flicker Wisp, which then flickered Sun Titan again, and I got back another permanent. It was just like...
These non-deterministic combos are just like so powerful in building your board.
Yeah, and that's how you attrition out someone. It's just like, you have all your permanents and you just watch all theirs get wiped away.
Jund them out.
Oh, I love that. This is the most Jund deck I could build without being in Jund, for sure.
Yes, exactly.
So that was a recursion. Then we have a couple super, super powerful, maybe some of the most powerful cards in the deck are the tutors. So we have Imperial Recruiter, Recruiter the Guard, and Runescarred Demon. We're also playing Demonic Tutor, Vampire Tutor, and Lightning Tutor, because I can't help myself playing tutors. I have a problem. I'm willing to admit it. I love tutors.
Well, maybe defensible in this deck. There are some like really cool bullet creatures that you might want to search for. Obviously, a lot of them have overlap, but in terms of like, I need to destroy a permanent or I need a wrath, you can search for Massacre Worm or you can search for Shriekmaw, etc. With those tutors, as well as some of like Recruiter of the Guard, Imperial Recruiter will get some of them too.
Or yeah, you just Imperial Recruiter for Agent of Treachery and just...
Stop.
Win. Not even win, just ruin some days.
Yeah, yes.
The recruiters are really, really good in this deck. Definitely the majority of creatures are able to be tutored up with one of them.
The most annoying thing about cards like the recruiters is that they're just trash when they're on board. You know, it's a 1/1. Sometimes that's good for, you know, when you need a chump block or whatever, but nobody ever aims a Path to Exile at them or whatever after. So they sit around. And when you finally get a blink effect on the battlefield, even if you don't have something huge like Agent of Treachery or Ashen Rider, you do have something like an Imperial Recruiter, which just gets you something huge. So it's kind of like this never-ending cavalcade of value for you.
And we were just talking about the 2 mana come in and draw you card. It's basically 3 mana, draw you the card you want. Like it's 1 more mana and you get what you need. And then we have 2 token generators when they enter, and they are extremely powerful together. Obviously, first one's Breya, our commander, and then working with Breya to destroy opponents' games is Urza, Lord High Artificer. And so why these two are so incredibly good together in this deck is because there's a slight treasure theme.
Yeah.
And so those treasures with Urza out, you're able to tap them without sacrificing them. Say you have 2 treasures, you tap them both, you have 2 blue floating, you feed that 2 blue into Breya, sack those 2 treasures that you just tapped.
With Breya's ability.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then lightning bolt an opponent or kill a creature or gain that 5 life that you really need. Honestly, a lot of the games come down to having a bunch of treasures out. Like it's gone so long, you've been on this attrition game plan, and then you have all these artifact tokens out, you play Urza, they all start generating mana without leaving the battlefield, and then you're sacking them and Breya bolting people to death.
There's been so many times where your board will look like relatively empty, but if you have like 2 cards like these, somebody goes to Wrath and you're like, really? Because I'll deal you 15 and you might die or whatever, you know, so it really does sneak out of nowhere. It's a really powerful combination. I think this is one of the better decks to have Urza as a role player in it.
We were just playing some games with Spoli, who hadn't played against this deck yet, and he goes, Merciless Eviction for artifacts, and just like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice 5 clues, 5 treasures, and yeah, Merciless Eviction for artifacts. Like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice all of these, kill you, kill one other person.
That's a powerful scenario that comes up quite often.
Oh yeah.
What else are you gonna do? You know, in terms of like when your board is full of stuff, you kind of have to board wipe, but you have this giant gun that you have aimed at everybody else's head and you can blast it anytime you want.
Yep, it's such a good feeling. Yeah, it really is.
So in addition to all of those enter the battlefield creatures, there's a couple more that are sort of in this other section that we're kind of calling the treasure theme, which is becoming a section in more and more EDH decks because Wizards loves the treasures.
Yeah, it's weird how many cards are printed with treasure on them. This deck specifically wants that just because of Breya. The treasures interact well with her abilities.
Yeah.
That's the only reason they're in here. I don't even think they're like overly busted or anything. They just work really well with Breya.
So we have the classic Dockside Extortionist, which, you know, incredibly expensive for a reason.
Yep.
Because it comes into play and it makes 10 mana or whatever, you know, or more, depending, in treasures, which is even better for this deck. It's not something like a mana geyser. It actually makes pieces of cardboard that you can use with Breya's ability, as well as to ramp on following turns. Similarly, Kalain, Reclusive Painter, makes a treasure token. It also makes other creatures enter the battlefield with counters on them. It's just a nice little value creature, especially to play on 2. And then we have Tavit, Seller of Secrets, which also makes clue tokens or treasure tokens depending on what the Council's Dilemma piece votes for.
And so I want to talk about this one specifically for the treasure makers. I've played this a bunch. I've like specifically tutored it out because I'm just really interested in the card to see if it's good enough to hold a 6 mana spot in this deck. And so you're playing against 3 people, you have an extra vote, so that's automatically 5 artifact tokens, whether they're treasures or clues. And I've found that no one actually knows how to vote right for this.
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm always voting for treasures, which makes them think that they should be voting for clues. But at the same time, like, I don't mind having the clues because worst case, I'm drawing cards.
Yeah.
And then best case, I don't need to draw cards. I can tap them for mana with Urza out and sack them to Breya to interact with the board. It's a really interesting card. Not 100% committed to it right now, but it's never been removed because of the Ward 3.
Yeah.
I can say that. It's always produced like around 5 to 4 treasures because, you know, sometimes it hits and there's only 3 players at the table.
Yep.
Someone's been knocked out.
Yep.
So it does get a little worse with the game going on. The jury's still on it. I think it's powerful because generating 5 artifact tokens, doesn't matter if they're treasure or clues, when it enters and when it connects is huge.
That sheer amount of actual like cardboard hitting the table is basically massive.
Exactly. Yeah, having those artifacts. Just a little side note, I hope that Wizards puts out more voting cards.
Voting cards are fun.
Yeah, I think they're fun. I think politics in EDH is such a huge part of having a good EDH game. That is set up to be the commander for that kind of deck, I think.
Absolutely. That could be really, really fun if we get a lot more of those Council's Dilemma cards. Though we do have some already, so I'm excited to brew with Tivi, honestly. And then, so rounding out the rest of the Treasures cards here, we have a couple of interesting cards. I think the most interesting to me is Professional Facebreaker, which is from Streets of New Capenna. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this card, to be honest. It's absolutely incredible, especially with the amount of treasure production that's come out in recent sets. But if you think about something like Dockside Extortionist, it turns Dockside Extortionist into like 2 mana, 1/2, comes into play, and you can draw 6. Or make 3 mana, draw 3, whatever, however many, you know, artifacts and enchantments there are on your opponent's side of the field. So I think this card is absolutely poised to like be something that you should keep your eye on as we move forward. And then we have a couple more cards here that will utilize these treasures as well. Another sort of like underdog card that we really like, Storm the Vault, is a 2 generic and a blue and a red legendary enchantment. And whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you control 5 or more artifacts, you transform it, and then it turns into Academy.
Academy.
Yeah, Better Academy, because it taps for 1 mana even if you don't have any artifacts. Vault of Catlacan. Very spicy and delicious foil here you have, Brett.
Personally, I try to get all the flip cards, especially from the Ixalan sets, because they turn to lands as foils. Just
yeah. Because they're delicious.
That backside foiled out. Oh, that's so nice.
He's a backside guy. So Storm the Vault is absolutely a card that always transforms in your deck, basically immediately when you're playing Breya, and also will get you a couple extra treasures along the way if you attack multiple players in a turn. Sometimes your net cost of casting this card is down to 2, basically, something like that.
I'll say every time I play this, it's never a 4-drop in this deck. It's a 5-drop every single time. I've done this countless times now. I'll play Breya on 4, so you get 3 artifacts, Breya, the 2 Thopters.
Yep.
And then you play your Storm the Vault, attack with the Thopters, create 2 tokens, because no one has
blockers at that point.
Usually people don't have flying blockers, or you just ask if you can get in for 1. You're like, oh, I want to make a treasure. And politic it up, and then there you go. You have your 5 artifacts, it flips and now taps for 5.
And you have an Academy for the rest of the game. And similarly to Urza, Lord High Artificer, you can do a lot of the same things with Breya, wherein you are tapping this for all of the artifacts in play and then sacrificing them to just machine gun down people's creatures or their actual life total. So that's a hugely important one that I think is like a sleeper on most people's lists. And then rounding out the treasures, we have Smothering Tithe, which is the classic, like, it's just out a lot of treasures. The art on Smothering Tithe of a man vomiting treasures
it's great.
Is exactly what happens when you play the card.
It really is.
Except it's all of your opponents vomiting and you're just bathing in their coins.
It's gross, but so accurate at the same time.
Yeah. So that's like an auto-include, especially in this deck. Smothering Tithe, like, auto-include basically in any white deck at this point, but certainly in Breya. And then a couple more cards here. We have Grim Hireling, which is basically this turns all of this treasure theme into another method of interaction.
This was a newer edition because I played against Hushbringer. We have 33 enter the battlefield effects on creatures.
Yeah.
And so they play Hushbringer. I can't remove it because all the removal is tied into creatures entering the battlefield effect.
Yeah.
It's just like, play Breya, and then if you don't have any artifacts on the field because you're not generating the Thopters with them, you're probably sacrificing a Signet and a Breya to remove a Hushbringer, which feels terrible. I've had to do it. And so Grim Hireling comes in, you sack those treasures instead, kill Hushbringer style effects.
Yeah. Recruiter of the Guard fetches it as well as all of your other tutors, so that's a huge one. And so there's a new card coming out from Commander Legends Baldur's Gate, Black Market Connections, which is probably also an auto-include in this deck. It's sort of like a new version of Phyrexian Arena, but it allows you to make treasures for 1 life a turn, or it allows you to draw a card for 2 life a turn, slightly different, or it allows you to make a 3/2 for 3 life. So there's a lot of flexibility there, and the fact that Breya has life gain built right into her means that you can offset a lot of that life loss, because obviously if you're just using it as a Phyrexian Arena, it's technically worse in that mode. You pay an extra life.
Yep.
But if you can offset the life loss, or if you can use the Changeling token that comes into play in any capacity, that's super, super cool. So that's a card that we're looking to add into this deck as soon as we're able to get our hands on it. With all of that being said, the other sort of like big portion of this deck is the blink effects or the double trigger effects. So when I say double triggers, cards like Panharmonicon will allow you to double triggers. And then the blink effects, Sword of Hearth and Home, Soul Herder, Thassa Deep Dwelling, Teleportation Circle, Conjurer's Closet, Flicker Wisp, Eerie Interlude, Strionic Resonator, Lithiform Engine, Eldrazi Displacer, Felidar Guardian, Resto Angel, Brago King Eternal, Yorion Sky Nomad, Ephemerate, Charming Prince, and then Phyrexian Metamorph, though we'll give the caveat to Phyrexian Metamorph that you usually want to be copying non-creature permanents like Panharmonicon or Conjurer's Closet, just to really, really stick it to him.
Yeah, I feel like Metamorph's life has usually been used to copy an enter battlefield effect creature.
Which it can.
Which is fine. It's the lowest way you want to use this card. You really want to copy a closet effect, like the Conjurer's Closet, Soul Herder. The things that stay on the battlefield forever and give you that repeat flicker effect are the most powerful cards in this deck. Metamorph is specifically in this deck to copy those cards.
And all 6 tutors also get Metamorph, which is very cool.
It's
Imperial
so
Recruiter
cool.
and Recruiter of the Guard both get it because it's technically a 0/0 in the deck. Yeah. So that's super interesting. And basically, when you look through this deck, I just mentioned a bunch of cards, basically all of the usual suspects that you would expect for blink effects, as well as like Strionic Resonator and Lithiform Engine, which are sort of like pseudo blink along with Panharmonicon. And as Brett was saying, they're super freaking powerful in this deck. Anytime there's a Conjurer's Closet down, it sort of seems innocuous at first.
Unless you've played against it, then you know what's up.
Unless you've played against it, then you know what's up. Because it's like a 5 mana, do nothing. It does trigger on the end step, which is great.
Yep.
But when there's stuff like Karmic Guide in play, Sun Titan, Phyrexian Delver, the turns start to get just absolutely out of control. Even just with an Agent of Treachery. 2 people have their commanders in play, and you have a Conjurer's Closet in play, and you play the Agent, you take 2 commanders.
I've done that.
People scoop. He does this all the time.
I do that all the time because I have a sick mind. And
he does.
One of our friends has finally just scoops now to Agent
Resolving.
Yep, Agent Resolving. If you know something of his is going to be targeted, it's done.
Yeah.
He might just scoop if it wasn't even targeting his stuff. He
Yes,
knows it's out. He knows it's going to be blanked.
Yeah.
And it's fun. For me. No one else.
That's a card that you could consider potentially not playing in this deck.
Agent.
Yeah. Depending on the salt level that you want
Our
to go
whole
for.
group has had multiple conversations about Agent of Treachery. I think it's a fair card. I abuse what it does in this deck. I think itself as a card is fine.
I mean, I'll let you have your opinion. I think that Agent of Treachery is something that you could consider cutting if your playgroup is not excited about your deck, because you don't want to become the permanent archenemy.
But this deck is styled to be archenemy. Whenever I play this deck, I expect to be playing against everyone else.
Yeah.
It's built in the way to be able to do that.
So that sort of wraps up like the blink effects, which are really sort of like the heart and soul alongside those enters the battlefield creatures. And then sort of like rounding off the deck, we have a bunch of talismans and signets, and obviously Soul Ring for ramp. Obviously, you want to have your ramp sources in this deck be artifacts. They're great with Breya, they're great with Urza, they're great with the flip side of Storm the Vault, etc. Any other Artifacts Matters card in this deck loves to have those in play. The signets really allow you to cast some of the more color intensive cards as well too. Stuff like Ashen Rider or Breya itself. Massacre Worm as well, triple black. And then the talismans allow you to actually activate Eldrazi Displacer's ability. And some of the lands in the deck, you have a couple pain lands in the deck, just specifically for that purpose as well.
I've been toying around putting in Mana Crypt in this deck, because the 2 colorless activates Breya. If you're taking too much life from it, you can sacrifice it through Breya, and then it also activates Eldrazi Displacer. So I think it has a place in it. The only reason I have not put it in is because it doesn't help cast Breya, which I have a huge problem with. I really hate putting in ramp that doesn't help cast your commander, especially when your commander is really important to the deck.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's gonna say that Mana Vault or Mana Crypt are not powerful in EDH.
Oh yeah, no.
But I love, that's a deck building decision that I love personally as well as you, that is sort of like, is this going to cast my commander? Is this on theme with what the deck is doing, as we talk about all the time? So that's why you see these 10 pieces of artifact ramp, and you don't necessarily see Mana Vault or Mana Crypt, though you certainly could if you want to play a higher power level deck. There are some rather expensive cards in this deck. Ashen Rider is 8 mana, etc., stuff like that. And you do have enough card draw that you should be able to get to a situation where you're hitting all your colors, but if you're trying to turbo towards Breya and just make that really consistent and make it sort of like the main focus of the deck, this is a really good place to be. And so as we've been going through some of these like blink effect cards, there are a couple like notable missing cards that a lot of people play in any blink deck they have, one being Deadeye Navigator, which is sort of like the quintessential, like, it's so good. It's so good.
The best blinker. Like I was saying, like Conjurer's Closet, Teleportation Circle, Soul Herder are great because they give you that repeatable effect. Deadeye Navigator gives you a repeatable effect if you have the mana open whenever you want. Not only is it giving you value on enter the battlefield effects, it's also protecting your creatures.
That is a hugely powerful card. It basically goes infinite with anything. You can throw a ham sandwich on the board and Deadeye Navigator will win you the game somehow.
All these cards that I would put in, like Deadeye Navigator, they're not in there because they combo with Dockside.
Yes.
It's literally it.
Yes.
It goes infinite mana so easily.
Yeah.
And then if you have infinite mana, you have kill everybody with Breya bolts.
Yeah, basically. So if you want to do infinite combo, power level, consider putting in Deadeye Navigator or Mist Meadow Witch, which is another card on this list, which is a nightmare of a card.
Same thing as Deadeye Navigator, except it just costs twice as much to activate it.
Yeah, and 2 colors of mana. Mist Meadow Witch, when it was in this deck in previous iterations, was a nightmare every time. Again, a lot of these cards seem innocuous, but then you go to try to kill something and it bounces it out of play, so you can't.
Blank, fizzle your spell.
Exactly. And so the other one here in this missing card column is Saheeli Rai, which obviously infinite combos with Felidar Guardian, and so we're not including it in this one. You can, if you'd like to do infinite combo. And then basically, in terms of like talking about like the win condition of the deck, I've seen this happen time in, time again. Breya ends up using the artifacts that are in play to bolt you to death.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of big creatures and there's a lot of like flying creatures and stuff like that. There's a lot of card advantage, but there's not necessarily anything that's sort of like, you know, swing out and win you the game with creature damage. You're basically like accruing incremental value for the whole game, utilizing that incremental value as mana and as sacrifice fodder to Breya to ping down your opponents slowly. And we'll get hit with, 3 damage every so often, or Brett will gain 5 life, and we find out at the end of the game that really added up. And so Brett's either at 60 life or we're all at 15 and we're about to die.
I have to say that's probably the way I win most with this deck is, like you were saying, through incremental value throughout the whole game. You're sitting at slightly higher life total with slightly more permanents on the field than your opponents, and then they're also attacking each other. Like their life total is slowly going down, and then there'll be a turn where you just like look at your board and like, I think I can kill everyone. I just sacrifice my board and kill everyone. Yeah. And it's true, it just happens. Yeah. So like you just bolt, and game.
A lot of the time, late game, Brett untaps and he's like, actually, I think you're all dead, and we're like, we had the win next turn. Yeah, and Breya is a great commander for this as well too, because it has the life gain ability as well and the removal ability as well, because people don't often want to attack you as much because either your life is super high or you punish them by killing their creatures. It's the perfect card.
It really is. I absolutely love Breya as a commander. I also love playing, like you were just saying, like a political game. So if you attack me, I will make sure something dies on your turn. And you know, I might not have it in my hand, but you know I have a Breya. And that when Breya is played, I could kill something with it.
Yeah. It's not an empty threat ever.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's basically how Brett sort of approached building Breya for our play group. Not immediately like max power level, obviously, but super fun, super focused on the commander, super focused on junding him out, because that is your sole purpose in Magic.
Yeah,
obviously.
If you want to play like an Archenemy style commander game, I suggest building this deck and playing against 3 people. I think you'll have actually a pretty good time. Like, you know, in Commander, it feels bad when people gain up on you sometimes.
Yes.
Like, you feel like you don't have enough to, like, push off everyone's attacks or whatever it is. This deck can take all of that and then dish it out at the same time.
Yeah, you're dodging blows and...
We're big karate guys, if you can't tell.
We do a lot of karate. When I'm not doing my plumbing activities.
Nice.
So anyway, thanks for watching, and let us know what you think of the deck. If you play Breya, what sort of cards do you like to play in your list? How do your opponents feel about playing against your Breya deck? We'd love to hear if you have any spicy inclusions that we should consider in here, and we'll keep you posted on updates as we go. That's kind of like the fun piece of EDH, is like trying out the new cards as they come out. We're super psyched about all of the new cards. We're super psyched about Breya, and we appreciate you watching with us in the Bulkhead. We'll see you next time.
Till next time.